The Solitude Walker, Yuki. Introduction by editor. The name of the Yuki creator, Taiko Mol, means literally solitude walker. The implement he uses is the lilke, or stone crook, four of which he arranges to form a cross, or more precisely, a swastika. Begin. There was only water, and over it a fog. On the water was foam. The foam moved round and round continually, and from it came a voice. After a time there issued from the foam a person in human form. He had wing feathers of the eagle on his head. This was Taikomol. He floated on the water and sang. He stood on the foam, which still revolved. There was no light. He walked on the water as if it were land. He made a rope and laid it from north to south, and he walked along it, revolving his hands one about the other, and behind him the earth was heaped up along the rope, but the water overwhelmed it. Again he did this, and again the water prevailed. 4 times this was done. Taiko Mo was constantly talking to himself. I think we had better do it this way. I think we had better try it that way. So now he talked to himself, and he made a new plan. He made 4 lilke, and planted one in the north and the others in the south, west, and east. Then he stretched them out until there were continuous lines crossing the world in the center. He spoke a word, and the earth appeared. Then he went along the edge and lined it with whale hide, so that the ocean could not wash away the earth. He shook the earth to see if it was solid, and he still makes this test, causing earthquakes. The earth was flat and barren, without vegetation and rivers, and still there was no light. In the ocean were fish and other creatures, but on the earth was nothing. Yet Taiko Mol had the feathers of various birds. He laid buzzard feathers and eagle feathers on the ground, and they became mountains. With lightning he split the mountains, and streams issued forth. He made all the birds and beasts, which in those times were persons. Afterwards he changed them into their present forms and created real human beings. He built the house, and in it he laid sticks of mountain mahogany. Those with knobs at the ends were to be men, the smooth ones, women, the small ones, children. He said, in the morning there will be much noise in this house. There will be laughing and talking. And in the morning the house was full of people, all laughing and talking. The earth was populated, and Taiko Mol went forth from the north all around the earth to give the tribes different languages. When all his work was done, he went up into the sky. Let's dissect this a little bit here. First, getting into the introduction, I want to take in this concept that I keep reiterating. Most people don't realize that a bill, whether it be legislative or a currency, has a concept associated with it. That is where it derives the word bill. That is how the word bill, which was a pre-existing word, was attached to the function of what a legislative bill or a financial note operates towards. So on a quick historical note, the Chinese invented paper money, and they used it for some 400 years before they realized that it was a destructive force that created more instability than it provided control. And they dropped it. And this is where you get the coins with the little holes in them that are seen all over the world when they traveled about. They're brass coins. Um, there's even Eskimo or Inuit tribes that incorporate Chinese coinage into some of their attire as relics that predate America again. So, but what's interesting here is I never, when I looked up the word bill in a classic dictionary, and this is one of them. This is a pretty good one here. I use this pretty regularly. So this is 1959. And though bill has a variety of definitions, I'm going to focus on just one, and that's in bill number 3. And then what you have to see is when you have a dictionary that has multiple words for one word, multiple definitions, the further down it goes is the more original term, the more original use of the word. So the more popular is the first one. Basically, you're getting closer to the origin. So when you get in the first bill, and it talks about banknote and treasury, $10 bill and law and all this kind of stuff like that, it associates it to Latin, to billa, for bulla, see, bull. First of all, like a bull market. And the bull is always associated with Zeus. But then you get into bill number 3, which is the oldest form of bill. Or actually there's 4, so there's an even older one. The oldest one is a bellow or roar, a boom, as of a bittern, a variant of bell. So like an enunciation. But the third one is a hook-shaped instrument used by gardeners in pruning, also bill hook, an ancient weapon with a hook-shaped blade. In ancient Egypt, they had the sword that was hooked. See, we think that the white people made a sword in the way that it was because that was the most efficient means of having a weapon. But they made the sword in order to replicate the cross. And that's basically the essence of the sword. The psychological mythology and construct of the sword. The Egyptians, they used bills, which were the hook-shaped swords. And those were reminiscent of the bull, or even the ram's horns, and the ram being a representation of war. So, but here they use a stone crook in order to talk about when he's placing this cross and he's making a 4-point, and it creates a swastika in the end. Basically, it creates a swastika. So he uses 4 different bills and puts them together to link in the center, so that it creates a swastika. A swastika being a symbol of a vortex. A vortex, now depending on what it is, when it's rounded, it's a natural state of basically life. When it's squared off, it's a representation of controlled demolition. So the Nazis were not the ones to invent it, as most people know that. So, but here's some other. That's just to say, that's the essence of a bill. That's why paper money exists. And it's all this, now we're on a new form, we're on digital currency. So this is a whole another era. The bill is coming to an end. And that goes with the psychological development of humanity as a whole. We're getting to the point where this means of a currency that is only derived from the wisdom of Sitting Bull, who said, the white man creates a system where the poor do all the work and pay the tithes, all to support the rich men. Where you have Huey P. Long, assassinated, a senator from Louisiana in the 30s, assassinated because he was bringing up the notion that only 4 men controlled as much wealth as the bottom 50% of the United States. And he said there cannot be a free nation or any concept of what we intend the Constitution to be, even in our dreams, to be any kind of reality, when one man's son is born into half of the entire nation's wealth, and then acquires half of what's left, and then gives that to his son. And meanwhile, there are millions upon millions of children born in the same citizenship status, allegedly, that are born to zero, zilch, and nada, dirt poor. So that's just my thing. A bill does exactly what it's meant to do, if that makes any sense. And now, in the beginning, the creation story here, there was only water and a fog over it. Again, all of the metaphors. Water represents the same thing: the mother, the womb. I say this is why in what we see now as a fetish is an obsession with all monotheistic religions being devoured by this concept that God is a man. I think the very notion that God is a man is some type of Freudian slip of a recognition that there is a greater underlying power, for no man is made of himself. And the gender centric obsession with God having to be a man, it could very much make God a non entity. But this fetish that he has to be a man, to the point where if you were to equate God to a woman, you would be denounced as a anti-Christ, anti-Judaic, anti-Mohammedan, whichever one comes about, as in to be degrading the true nature of God, and that would be seen as a threat, almost more dangerous than an atheist, more probability, more probably equivalent, actually not probably, literally equivalent to the justification for the Salem witch hunt and then the degradation of women. People don't associate the Salem witch hunt burning, where they burned witches that were women who were trying to learn how to read and learn science and healing, apart from the brutal like basically what we would equate to Scientology type healing things, where just let the sick person suffer the ailment, and if God wants them to be healed, then they'll be healed. When women were trying to apply, learn knowledge as so as to apply healing properties, they were denounced as witches and burned. They don't equate that. They can't equate that. We can't equate that because it's too psychologically traumatic to the experience of the women who hundreds of years later, 200 years later plus, were trying to acquire what they consider the right to vote, a voice within the public forum, and towards the means of trying to prevent that from happening for the preservation of the greater good of society, towards the founding fathers' intent for this country, which excluded women completely. While it mentioned slaves, it never mentioned women. It gave slaves 3/5 of a right of a vote, and it gave women none intentionally. And to protect that intention, women of the 80-year plus long struggle for suffrage, from the early 1800s, close to 100 years really, to all the way up to 1920 when they got the right to vote, they were legally beaten in their homes. They were sent to insane asylums, and this is where a lot of psychiatrists did experiments on the women leaders in order to clear them of the evils and the insanity that was in their head. That why would you go against the founding fathers' intention for you not to be able to vote and not to stay in your place, or God's intention or the Bible's? They were lobotomized. They had human experiments done on them in order to specifically shut them down. So this is all this fetish with God being a man. This all comes from that, and it's no, it's man's evil. No, yeah, whatever you want to call it, it comes from this. But this notion that even in the Bible where it says God created water first, this is a psychological flip of trying to imply that the feminine comes from the masculine, so as to justify the total subjugation of the feminine, just like from the subjugation of nature. So women are in essence just the Mother Earth. This is true. The Mother Earth is our mother, and we are taught and we are ingrained in us on a spiritual level, which goes to show that has a power greater than intellect, to engage women the same way one would engage nature. And therefore we see that the great powers of the earth, they claim to be progressive in their acceptance of the feminine, but the way that they treat the earth that they live on is the same way that women are treated in general in the greater part of their society. So there was only water and a fog over it. A water is a conscious. There was only a consciousness, and over it was a fog. There was a disclarity. There was a uncertainty. There was a something, an urge for something more. On the water was a foam, from the fog to a foam. The idea started to take into a substance. At that time, and a voice issued. the first thing that come out of the foam and all of this. And it also talks about different forms of life too, different forms of water. A voice came first, and then a person in human form. Again, the main creator character of all of these mythologies is supposed to be an identification of an attribute of the human being internally. As seen here from an excerpt from a dialogue between Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyer. Actually, you know what? I lost it, so I'm not even going to try to find it. Oh, here we go. What do we learn about? What do we learn from our dreams? You learn about yourself. How do we pay attention to our dreams? All you have to do, Moyers and Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell. All you have to do is remember your dream in the first place and write it down. Then take one little fraction of the dream, one or two images or ideas, and associate with them. Write down what comes to your mind, and again what comes to your mind, and again. You'll find that the dream is based on a body of experiences that have some kind of significance in your life and that you didn't know were influencing you. Soon the next dream will come along and your interpretation will go further. Basically, your dreams are where gods are born from. So, on that context, every creator figure is a creative element of the human capacity in every individual. The stories were not meant to isolate the hearer from the characters involved. So what I like about this particular creator story is the emphasis on Tycho Moll was constantly talking to himself. I think we had better do it this way. I think we had better try it that way. That type of human creativity and ingenuity and self-reflective and is totally denigrated in modern Western Abrahamic influenced ideology, which teaches you're not supposed to, you follow orders or you follow company policy. As much as it was, we look at the evil Nazis and everything that they did, the truth is that during the Nuremberg trials, their legal defense that they held to was, and what is still held to by, as a legal defense for our own troops and for corporate personnel who are involved in stuff like fracking and who are involved in stuff like even car manufacturing with all like the cigarette companies, pharmaceutical companies, cigarette companies and alcohol companies. We'll deal with that. Cigarette companies and alcohol companies. Alcoholism kills, health-wise, 5 million people a year. Cigarettes kill 5 million people a year around the planet. Okay, they don't count with. If you count with alcohol the amount of water that is the drinkable water, the last clean, potable sources of water, and compound on the 5 million people that died from the effects of alcoholism with the millions of people that die from lack of water and starvation that is a result of lack of water. The alcohol company stands as to dwarf every year what the Nazis did in the entirety of their campaign. So, but these people are taught in this dutiful concept that where you're at is where God's will for you, an external force, has put you, has allowed you, and you deem the evidence of the benefit or the positive or negative is based in the personal gains that you make. This is why private property is such a obsessive concept within Abrahamic religions. It's what you get, gimme, 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 because the more you get, the more stable you are in what you acquire based on the bills and the money that you get, the notes, the finance, the wealth, the stuff, the acquisition. The more security you have that that's God's will for you to be there. It is no longer, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of God. It is, in truth, that is a oxymoron in one sense in practice, and the psychological impact is that it is impossible for a poor person to get into the kingdom of God, because that is evidence that you were never with God. You were never chosen. You were never in the place that God wanted you to be. And so this self-reflective thing, any society or sociological structure that instigates self-reflective contemplation, am I doing what's right? I was a bartender. I was really good. I have immense amount of creativity. I was establishing recipes, learning the history of this. Learning the history of prohibition and all of this stuff as a part of my endeavor towards becoming a successful bartender, moving forward with high aspirations. And it comes to a point where I have to break away from the Western Abrahamic go, 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 get. I'm making money. Wow, I'm making $200 to $300 a night in one day, in mostly cash, and pretty much all cash. And then on top of that, I get a cheesy little paycheck. It comes at that point where the contemplation comes in. It's not. I can no longer determine if what I'm doing is right based on the revenue that I'm getting, based on the reaction of the people sitting on the other side of the barrier, the bar that separates me from them, the create the expression of gratitude for, wow, this is very creative, thank you, you helped me, you taught me something, why didn't, what do you like to drink? Scotch? Oh, what kind? This kind? Here, let me give you a breakdown of the history of Isla Scotch. Oh, you like whiskey? Did you know whiskey originates in Ireland? Oh no. Did you? Hey, Mexico tequila. Do you know that mezcal goes back some 5,000 years in underground distilling? That's the same kind of distilling that the Chinese use, and that there are bamboo utensils that are used in distilling mezcal in the jungle lands, and there is no bamboo indigenous anywhere to the Americas. You know what this so this is all very appealing and self-satisfying and gratifying, and a feeling, a sense of accomplishment. But in the end, as good as I get, I'm participating in an industry that is the responsibility that is responsible directly for the deaths of millions, literally millions of people around the planet, not to mention the maiming and the violence that goes along with it, that I learned about, that I could no longer ignore in the prohibition movement, that it still exists today, the sexual assaults, the child molestation. This is all the reality that goes within that. And the best I can do is to expand that further. And if I were to become the greatest and most successful, I could only increase. I thought that I could teach people how to, is water. The crux of it, behind everything else, is the water. And the cross has always represented the four cardinal directions. And people want to believe, in modern day, people want to believe that in some kind of weird sense, the cross was stolen from Christianity before the cross was ever Christian. As in, the devil knew the cross was going to be the tool that he used, and he knew people were going to do it. So what he did is he started, like the Celtic cross that's famous, because of the decorativeness and all the artwork that goes in Celtic stuff, what's known as like Celtic knottery. That's associated with some kind of grandific, honorific Catholic accomplishment of the merging of Celtic culture, the subjugation of Celtic culture with brutal Abrahamic fascism, fascial religions. But the truth is, the Celtic cross predates Catholicism's introduction, Abrahamic fascial religious in Celtic society, because it was used as a tool of measurement for the sky. The circle that's why it has a circle. The circle and the cross part were a gauge, a measurement for angles and directions and distance. And it was the absorption of it, the robbery of it, just like the land was stolen from the Indians and from the Celts. Elements of their culture and their knowledge was likewise stolen from them. So that's my story. I like it. And stay awake.